Here's a question that actually confused an entire army. If you kill the leader of a group of soldiers, what happens to the rest of them? Most of the time in most armies in most of history, the answer was simple. The group falls apart. Soldiers freeze. They don't know what to do. They wait for someone new to tell them. German commanders in World War II knew this rule like they knew their own name. It had worked for them again and again in Poland, in France, on the Eastern Front. Take out the officer, and the unit stops fighting well. Then they ran into the American army. And something happened that didn't match the rule at all. German soldiers watched American squads lose their leaders in battle, and instead of falling apart, some of them fought harder, faster, smarter. It confused them so much that some German officers wrote about it afterward, trying to explain it to themselves. They couldn't figure out how an army could lose its head and keep moving like nothing had happened. Today we're going to find out why. And by the end, you're going to understand a secret about teamwork that works just as well on a soccer field or in a classroom as it did on a battlefield. Let's go. For hundreds of years, most armies were built like a pyramid. At the top, the general, below him, the officers, below them, the sergeants, and at the bottom, the regular soldiers. Orders flowed one direction, downward. The soldiers at the bottom weren't usually expected to make big decisions. They were expected to follow the plan the officer gave them. This actually makes a strange kind of sense. If everyone just does exactly what they're told, an army can move like a machine, with every part clicking into place. But machines have a weakness. If you break one important part, the whole machine can stop working. In this military pyramid system, the officer was that important part. He held the plan in his head. He made the decisions. Everyone else was just executing. So enemy soldiers learned a brutal but effective trick. Find the officer and take him out first. Once he's gone, the whole unit often loses direction. It's like pulling the string out of a puppet. The puppet doesn't know how to move on its own anymore. Germany's army, called the Wehrmacht, was extremely good at this. Their soldiers were trained to spot officers on the battlefield, often by how they moved, where they stood, who other soldiers looked at for direction and target them first. It had worked on almost every army they'd fought so far. Then, starting in 1944, German soldiers began fighting Americans in huge numbers in France, and their trusted trick started, not working the way it used to. Here's why. Years earlier, back home in the United States, the Army had made a decision that seemed small at the time, but changed everything. Instead of training only officers to think and lead, they trained regular soldiers, privates, corporals, sergeants, to understand the goal of a mission, not just their own tiny piece of it. Let's use an easy example. Imagine two different soccer teams. Team A has a coach who calls every single play from the sideline. You go left, you pass now, you shoot. The players are talented, but they've never been taught to read the game themselves. They just follow the coach's calls. Team B has a coach who explains the strategy before the game even starts. Our goal is to control the middle of the field and pass quickly. Then, during the game, the players make their own decisions based on that goal because they understand why, not just what. Now, what happens if each coach gets sick and has to leave at halftime? Team A might completely fall apart. Nobody knows what to do without the sideline calls. Team B keeps playing well. Maybe not perfectly, but well, because the players already understood the plan. They don't need someone shouting instructions every 10 seconds. The American Army, especially by the middle of World War II, was becoming a lot more like Team B, and the German army they were fighting was still very much built like Team A. So how do you actually train soldiers to think for themselves like that? It wasn't magic. It came down to how they trained. In a lot of German military schools, students learned very precise, correct answers to battlefield problems. Given this exact situation, do this exact thing. It worked great as long as the battle matched what they'd practiced. American training, especially for sergeants and junior officers, started leaning a different way. Instructors would give soldiers a messy, unclear problem with no single correct answer, and ask them to figure it out as a group. Then, instead of grading them on the right answer, the instructor asked one simple, powerful question. Why did you choose that? That question mattered more than people realized, because memorizing an answer only helps you when the exact same situation happens again. But learning to explain why you made a choice trains your brain to solve brand new problems, the ones nobody planned for. And on a real battlefield, almost every problem is a brand new problem. Smoke, confusion, broken radios, an officer suddenly gone. None of that matches the neat plan from the map room. So American soldiers, all the way down to privates in some units, were being trained not just to obey, but to understand. And a soldier who understands the goal can often keep moving toward it, even if the person originally in charge can't lead anymore. Let's picture something that could realistically happen in a battle like the ones fought in France in the summer of 1944. An American squad, a small group of around a dozen soldiers, is moving through a field, and their lieutenant is hit and can't continue leading. In an army trained only to wait for orders from the top, this squad might stop, take cover, and wait for someone new to arrive and tell them what to do next. But in a lot of American units, something different tended to happen. The most experienced sergeant nearby would step in almost immediately, not because a new piece of paper gave them a promotion, but because everyone already understood the mission. Reach that tree line, take that position, protect that flank. The squad kept moving because the goal survived, even when the leader didn't. This wasn't rare, and it wasn't superhuman. It was the training doing exactly what it was designed to do. German after-action reports from the fighting in France in 1944 noted, with real confusion, that American units seemed to keep functioning and adapting even after their officers were killed or separated from them, something their own doctrine didn't expect from an enemy force. Put yourself in the shoes of a German officer for a second. Your whole strategy is built on one core idea: cut off the head and the body stops moving. You've used this idea successfully for years, across multiple countries. Now you're fighting an army where that doesn't fully apply anymore. You take out an officer, and somehow, a sergeant just steps into his role almost seamlessly. You take out that sergeant too, and somehow the squad keeps functioning at a basic level anyway. It's not that the Americans didn't feel the loss of their leaders. They absolutely did, and casualties among American officers and sergeants were extremely high in places like Normandy. But the system itself didn't collapse the way German doctrine expected it to. Leadership had been spread out, like a net instead of a single string. Cutting one thread didn't make the whole net fall apart. This is genuinely one of the reasons some German military reports from that period describe American small unit resilience with real surprise. What we have, historically, is a pattern documented across many reports: American squads and platoons continuing to function and adapt after losing their leaders, which was unusual compared to what German commanders were used to seeing from other armies. The clearest test of this idea came in December of 1944, in a freezing forest in Belgium called the Ardennes. This is where the famous Battle of the Bulge happened. Germany launched a massive surprise attack, throwing hundreds of thousands of soldiers at a thin, weak part of the American line. Communication lines were cut. Whole units were surrounded. Many American soldiers found themselves cut off from their officers, their radios, and their original plan completely. By every rule the German command believed in, this should have caused total collapse. Instead, all over the battlefield, small groups of American soldiers, often led by sergeants, sometimes just by whichever soldier had the most experience, began organizing themselves on the spot. They didn't wait for new orders from faraway headquarters. They looked at the situation in front of them and made a decision. Hold this position, defend this crossroads, protect this road. These improvised, self-organized defenses, especially in places like the northern shoulder of the German attack, ended up slowing the German advance at several critical points, buying crucial time for larger American forces to regroup and respond. None of it was ordered from the top. It came from soldiers who had been trained again and again to understand the mission, not just wait for instructions. So here's the big idea underneath all of this. An army, or honestly, any team, becomes fragile when only one person understands the plan. If that person disappears, everyone else is stuck. But a team becomes much stronger when everyone understands the goal, not just their tiny piece of it. Then, if one leader is gone, someone else can naturally step up, because the whole team already knows what they're trying to accomplish. Think about your own life for a second. Maybe it's a school project. Maybe it's a sports team. Maybe it's a group of friends planning something together. If only the leader knows the full plan, the group falls apart the moment that person is absent. But if everyone understands the actual goal, not just their one small job, the group keeps working even when someone's missing. That's the real secret hiding inside this whole story. It's not really about weapons or tanks or one single battle. It's about how you build a team that doesn't break when it loses a piece. Let's bring it all together. German commanders built their whole strategy around one idea: take out the leader, and the group stops working. It had worked for them for years. But the American army trained its soldiers differently, teaching not just orders but understanding. That meant when leaders were lost in battle, especially in places like Normandy and the Ardennes, American squads could often keep functioning, adapting, and moving toward their goal, even without the person who was originally in charge. That's not magic. It's not because American soldiers were braver than anyone else. It's because of training that spread leadership out instead of locking it inside one person. And the coolest part is, this same idea can make your team stronger too, whether that's at school, in sports, or anywhere else you work with other people. If this video taught you something new, hit that like button and subscribe for more history breakdowns like this one. And let me know in the comments, have you ever been part of a team that kept going strong, even when the leader wasn't there? I'd love to hear about it. See you in the next one.